for joining us today for our procurement workshop with the Office of Community Development, Local Government Assistance. We are going to get started here in a minute, but I do want to say if you have any questions, please put them in the Q&A box below and we will answer the questions at the end of the presentation. Okay, so I guess we can go ahead and get started. So here is the contact information for the procurement staff in the office: myself, Denise McGee, and William Hall. All of us are here to help you with your procurement questions. And so you can contact any of us, and then we'll usually get together to discuss with the entities who have questions collectively as a team and kind of do it that way. So that's how we do things. So here's the agenda for today. So we're going to go over the purpose of procurement, some basic information, what we look for when we're going to come and monitor your projects, some general procurement principles, federal procurement procedures, methods and contract types, the format of competitive proposals, which is very, very important, evaluating factors, evaluation and scoring methods, examples, and some final notes.
Christy, I'm sorry, you're still on the first screen.
Okay, so this is the agenda. Sorry about that. So the purpose of procurement or the presentation is to acquaint potential applicants of federally assisted programs with federal grant procurement requirements, with an emphasis on utilizing competitive proposals for procurement of professional services. And just so y'all know, the contact information is also in a later slide. So don't worry about that. That'll come again. Sorry about that. So the basics of procurement. So step one, if you do not have a procurement policy, you have to draft one. And it needs to be adopted by the council or the board or whatever governing body your entity has. There is an outline on our website under forms and information in the LCDBG procurement procedures. Step two, which I know it sounds a bit cheeky, you have to follow that adopted policy. And then because we come out and monitor, you need to maintain all files related to the procurement, which we review during the visits. And step four, you must ensure that the procedure is conducted to ensure full and open competition. So the solicitation is where a lot of people kind of get caught up in. So the solicitation must be publicized. You can, if your entity has a website, please put it on, you can put it on your website. You can put it on your Facebook page. Whatever official journal you may have, whether it's a newspaper or whatever kind of circular you have, you can put it in there as well. You can direct solicit, so you can email. We suggest a minimum of 10 firms. So if you're looking for an engineering firm, you need to solicit 10 engineering firms. You can email them, or 10 administrative firms. We have some contact information on these firms that you can get from us as well. So on our website, we're going to have a place for you to submit to us your solicitations, and we'll be happy to put it on our website for people to go and look. So the solicitation has to be available for a minimum of 2 weeks. You have to ensure a fair competition. So the goal is to get more than one solicitation, or one bid rather, to your solicitation. Currently the water sector programs do not require our prior approval, but it is recommended So we're here to help with all that. So monitoring. To borrow one of Jimmy Martin's, we miss Jimmy very much, by the way, favorite sayings, if it's not in writing, it did not happen. So everything needs to be in writing in your files. So I suggest having a separate file for each procurement that you do to keep everything straight, especially when we come to monitor. So what we look for when we come to monitor is the adapted procurement policy, the dates it was adopted, if there's been any amendments or anything of that nature. We're going to look for the request for proposals for the administrative firms. We're going to look at the solicitation. So a copy of it needs to be in there. How it was solicited, copies of the proposals that were received. Did you get more than one response? The evidence of the selection process. So this is all very, very important. And then the request for qualifications for engineering and architecture firms. Again, how it was solicited, a copy of the proposal. Did you get more than one response? Was there any evidence that competition was restricted? So if there were any, we were also going to look to see if there were any contractors that were involved in the procurement process competing for an award, which is a big no-no. Were there any other non-competitive or arbitrary actions that impeded the competition? So we're going to look at the non-competitive proposals. Was there a rationale for using this method? Were any of the following applicable? The item that is available from a single source. So this would be a sole source. You have to get permission for sole source items. Was there a public exigency or an emergency for the item that you're purchasing? And then did we authorize in response to a written request for the LCDBG projects? So these procurement policies, these are all, it doesn't matter if it's water sector, CDBG, CARES, it's all going to fall underneath the federal procurement regulations because it's federal dollars. So when we monitor, we're also going to look to see if there was inadequate competition. Did the applicant sufficiently publicize the solicitation? That's why we're going to look to see, you know, if you put it on your website, print out a copy of the website for that day when you publish it. Or was there a Facebook page post? So we're going to look at your Facebook page, that types of thing. So if you have all of that documentation ready to go when we get there, it will make our lives and yours much easier. And then copies of all of the emails that you sent out to solicit any firms. So we're also going to look to see if there were any restrictive requirements or arbitrary actions placed upon the bidding process. If the item was available from a single source, if there was an emergency, and if we authorized the purchase. So the contract has to include the following. So the contract needs to include the scope of services with a breakout of prices or estimated costs, the contract amount for fixed price contracts, the method of compensation, contract dates, the begin date and the end date, and access to records clause. You also need to include the following provisions in the contract. So the contracts for more than simplified acquisition threshold, cause and convenience, rights to inventions made under a contract, the Clean Air Act and Federal Water Pollution Control Act, debarment and suspension, the Byrd Anti-Lobbying Amendment. Those all need to be included as for your engineering firm especially. So if the contract was amended, we need to know, we need the copy of the amendment. We need to make sure that the contract was signed by all parties, including any amendments that are in there. And then for the LCDBG projects, does the contract withhold 10% for the consultant? So some basic questions that we get asked all the time. How many people do we need to rate the RFQ or RFP? So typically 3 people to score the applications is sufficient. Usually it can be the mayor, the clerk, it can be a council person, If your city or entity is big enough to have a public works department, let's say, you can ask one of them to participate, especially on the engineering side for the RFQ. So one of the other things that we need to discuss is an engineer cannot score the engineering firm RFQs, especially if they're competing for that job. That's a huge conflict of interest. So, but if you're applying for public facilities, water sector, it would be beneficial, like I said, if you have someone from the Public Works Department to assist in scoring. So now we're going to talk about some simple procurement principles, which I guess I don't think there's really anything involved in procurement that's simple. So general procurement principles: all procurement transaction, regardless of the dollar amount, must be conducted to provide full and open competition. Some situations considered to be restrictive of competition include, but not limited to, placing unreasonable requirements on firms in order for them to qualify to do business, requiring unnecessary experience and excessive bonding, non-competitive pricing practices between firms or between affiliated companies, non-competitive awards to consultants that are on retainer contracts. This is one of the things that we actually hear about quite a bit for consultants and engineers. If they are on retainer for your entity and they have any type of knowledge about the project, they are precluded from applying to do the job. So they cannot do the job. So organizational conflicts of interest: specifying only one brand name product instead of allowing an equal product to be offered and describing the performance of other relevant requirements of the procurement. So one of the things that we've come across in our Love Louisiana Outdoors project is that people are purchasing specific playground equipment and physical fitness activity equipment, and which is wonderful. We're very excited about this project. But when you put that out to bid, you have to put that out to bid, especially because the dollar amounts are going to be more than $10,000 for each item. You're going to need to get more than one quote for each of these items. So if you have any questions about that, please feel free to call us. Some of the any arbitrary action in the procurement process: methods of procurement to be followed when purchasing materials and supplies or contracting services must be included. So in your procurement policy, there should be a code of conduct that prohibits elected officials, staff, or agents from personally benefiting from a federal procurement must be included. The policy should prohibit the solicitation or acceptance of favors or gratuities from contractors or potential contractors. Sanctions or penalties for violations of the code of conduct by either grantee officials, staff, or agents, or by contractors or agents must be identified. Proposed procurements must be reviewed by staff to avoid unnecessary and duplicative purchases. Also, consideration should be given to consolidating or breaking out procurements to obtain a more economical purchase. You cannot split purchases. So we'll come across this pretty soon for the Love Louisiana Outdoors program. Sorry. You can't split up the playground equipment to be under a certain threshold. You have to do it all on one, quote. Affirmative efforts must be undertaken to hire women's business enterprises, minority firms, and labor surplus firms, both by the grantee and the project's prime contractor. Method of contracting outlined in the policy should be an acceptable. So this would be fixed price, cost plus fixed price, purchase orders, the cost plus a percentage of cost contracts must be specifically prohibited if federal funds are involved. Procedures to handle and resolve disputes relating to procurement actions of the grantee must be included. Methods of procurement to be followed when purchasing materials or supplies. Conflicts of interest in the award and or administration of contracts must be avoided. So procurement method and contract types. So methods of procurement, there's the micro purchase, small purchase, and sealed bid. So price determination, best value is lowest price, adherence to established process for different purchases. Competitive proposals have qualitative factors and cost. They select the proposal that represents the best value. Results of the solicitation and planning and approach are required for different purchases. Methods for fixed price purchases. So the micro purchases up to $10,000. So a competitive solicitation is not required. So for the Love Louisiana Outdoors project, there are several entities that are doing their own administration, but they are using their own fund, they're using their own funds or the grant funds to do the ERR specifically, which would be under $10,000. We do not need to approve that as long as it's under $10,000, and they can get that piece done for them. A small purchase up to $30,000, which is state law, not federal, and quotes or other competitive solicitation is required. Sealed bids, it's formal advertising. Bids are publicly opened, selection by price, and fixed price contract award. Competitive proposals, cost and qualitative factors are considered, typically used for professional services. Requests for proposals or RFPs for administrative consultants, and requests for qualifications or RFQs are for engineering firms. The federal contract types. So a fixed price is when the procurement consists of certainty of performance and has specific accomplishments and deliverables. A cost reimbursement contract is when the procurement consists of performance uncertainties, reimburses both efforts and specific accomplishments and deliverables. A time and materials contract provides for acquiring supplies on the basis of direct labor hours at specific hourly rates. That includes wages, overhead, general and administrative expenses, and profit, and materials at cost, including, if appropriate, material handling costs as part of material costs. Federal contract pricing, the lump sum price for a definable work or product or deliverable. All contractor costs are contained in a single price. Unit price for iterations of lump sum work, products, or deliverables. Billable hours for applied work efforts with other costs included as overhead charges. Reimbursable costs for significant itemized costs in addition to personnel compensation. So competitive proposals. This is where our office will be able to assist you in the RFP and the RFQs. So here's the format for the RFP and RFQ, and they follow basically these same 11 or 12 items. So first of all, you need to tell us why you're issuing the proposal. So if it's for we call it the Parks program, if it's for Love Louisiana Outdoors, you need to tell them what you're doing, why you need this. The objective explains what the procurement is seeking to obtain. So we are seeking to obtain an administrative consultant to assist XY. Snippet, 2 or 3 sentences about the entity who is soliciting. Definitions, you need to identify any items that are particular and peculiar to the procurement. The project description, you need to provide sufficient information for the proposers to estimate the work efforts and the time needed to accomplish the tasks. The schedule of events. So it outlines the significance events of the procurement. So the date of the solicitation, the date in which they are due, the date where you anticipate making a decision, those types of things. All of that has to be in the solicitation. The scope of services, it identifies what tasks and or accomplishments the contractor will be expected to perform. The contract and the payments, it identifies the type of contract and the type of prices that will be utilized in the contract. The proposer's information, this identifies the relevant information about each proposer. The selection process, it identifies how and who will be conducting the evaluation, whether it's going to be a one-step or a two-step process, and if you're going to have interviews. 11 is the evaluation criteria. So threshold requirements, these are good to include because it allows you to put in minimum requirements for all proposers in order to compete. So in Louisiana, let's just say for a project, which you need anyway, you need a licensed engineer in Louisiana that has, the stamp and all that stuff. If they give you a Mississippi license and stamp, then they are immediately not eligible for the project. Weighted evaluation criteria, the criteria used for comparison of proposers and selection of contractor. The price and cost, it identifies how much weight, price, and cost are going to be in the solicitation required for all procurement except for design professionals. The submission requirements. This is to request any additional or information that's not elsewhere requested. It states the requirements of submission. So if they need to bring 4 copies original copies mailed to the office, if it's okay to email it, that's in there as well. So this is where that's there. And we do have this all written out. If you need a copy of it, we're happy to provide it. And we're going to post the slideshow and the webinar to our website tomorrow, probably. So threshold versus weighted point criteria. So threshold, these are factors that are important to the procurement, but most everyone applying more than likely has them. So it's not going to provide any meaningful discrimination between the proposers. So this would be like a DUNS registration, which I know that's changing here shortly. The number of years that the entity has been in business. So if you require like a minimum of 5 years that the firm has been in business, this would be a place to put that. And then the number of CDBG projects that they have completed. So the weighted evaluation criteria are factors that are important to the procurement and will provide meaningful comparison among the proposers, separating them, the stronger proposers from the weaker ones. So I'm going to go into a little bit more depth about the evaluation factors. So evaluation factors, you need to select the source or sources whose proposal is the best value to the entity. The best value may not necessarily always be the lowest price if other evaluation factors can establish a better value. Evaluation factors must represent the key areas of importance and emphasis to be considered in the selection and decision, and support meaningful comparison and discrimination between the competing proposals. So these are some areas in which we can do evaluation factors. So qualifications, experience, capabilities, past performance, and approach plan. And by the way, you don't have to choose every single one of these when you're setting up your solicitation. You can select 2, maybe 3, whatever your entity can handle is what you need to do. You don't get points with us if you decide to do all of them. you're just making it harder on yourself. So choose the ones that you know you can handle. So qualifications and experience are easier to use, but they're less impactful. Capabilities, past performance, and approach plan are more impactful, but they're more difficult to use. So qualifications. The qualifications is what the proposer is qualified to do. Experience, what has the proposer actually done? Capabilities, what can they do? Past performance, how well have they done it? And approach plan, that objective, project description, scope of services all align. So some examples of these things, qualifications would be academic and or personnel experience from firm's personnel to be employed by the project. Experience, the firm's previous comparable projects by type, size, and number. Capabilities, what personnel and their qualifications, specialties are available for the project. Past performance, quantifiable measures the proposer has performed previously. And approach plan, proposers are asked for their recommendations on how to accomplish the objective implied in the program description. So here's some advantages and disadvantages to all of the evaluation factors. So qualifications, they're simple to use. They don't require a lot of data for the proposers to gather. They can apply quantitative analysis and comparison and be used as a threshold factor. The disadvantage, it's not useful as a discriminating factor, and it doesn't provide a meaningful impact when you go to score the proposer. Experience, it's simple to use. It does not require much data. It can apply quantitative analysis and comparison and can also be used as a threshold factor. Again, it's not useful to discriminate between the entities and doesn't provide a meaningful impact. Capabilities can provide meaningful discrimination among proposers, and you can also apply quantitative analysis and comparison. It's difficult to use as a threshold, so this one would be one of the ones that you would use as an evaluating factor. Past performance can provide meaningful discrimination among proposers. It does, however, require extensive data gathering, requires subjective evaluation. So of course, if someone is trying to get a job with you, they're not going to tell you that they just stunk up, one of their other projects. They're going to give themselves glowing responses because they want the job. So you have to be really, really careful how you word the past performance, and because you don't want them to, because it is subjective. So everybody's going to give themselves a high mark. So that has to be really careful, and it requires multiple people to evaluate to ensure bias is being checked. And then approach plan can provide meaningful discrimination among proposers, but it requires subjective evaluation and extensive written evaluation plans, and requires a multiple person evaluation to check. So evaluation factors, establishing value. This is not on here to scare y'all. We're just trying to give you an idea of, if you just have qualifications and experience, that's like a 25 to 20% value of the scoring. And then the cost should be between 75 and 80%. And then again, qualifications used as a threshold, and experience up to 20%, capabilities 20 to 30%, and then cost 50 to 60%. And then it just kind of keeps going, so if you're using qualifications and experience and capabilities as a threshold, performance needs to be 40 to 50%, and cost can be 25 to 30%. And if you're using I had that backwards. If you're using qualifications, experience, and capabilities all as threshold, you want to give higher weight to performance, and you can reduce the weight of the cost. So there must be, in your policy, you must have a written method for conducting technical evaluations of the proposals. So the rating factor, you have to identify what factor is being evaluated. The evaluation criteria, you have to identify what items will be evaluated. The proposers need to know what you're looking for, and it needs to be crystal clear in the solicitation what it is you're requiring of them. The rating factor rationale, explain the reason the factor is relevant to this contractor selection. Submission requirements, identify the items the proposers must submit for the evaluation. And evaluation basis, explain how the items will be evaluated. So evaluation and scoring methods. So evaluation and scoring methods. So we had more slides in here on this, but it was a lot. So what we have decided to do, if any of you, when you work with us individually, we will go into more depth on these items. I didn't want to overwhelm anybody with stuff today because, you know, procurement is already overwhelming as it is. So as we work with each entity individually, we will go into more depth as to these score and evaluation methods. So the comparative point scale can be used in all scoring situations. It provides for a precise comparative measurement of the evaluated items among the proposers. The grouping point scale is to be used when cost is the most significant other scoring factor. It is used to highlight a significant qualitative difference between proposers. A higher cost proposer may not be the better value because it scores substantially better with the qualitative measure. Should not be used unless cost is heavily weighted. Ordinal ranking is to be used when quick but less precise or detailed score is required. A weighted point system is similar to the comparative point system, and it's to be used when some components of the evaluated items are more important than others and scored accordingly. The adjectival rating system must have a clearly defined criteria that distinguish one rating adjective from another. And evaluation factor, experience, the number of projects in the last 8 to 10 years, let's say 5 to 10 years. So here's just some additional information for you guys. So our office is federally funded through the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development. We also have to follow these procurement policies and federal regulations because our money is federal. So I can promise you, we know how you feel because we are going through it as well with state procurement office. So the department's procurement guidance is provided by the HUD handbook 7460.8. And we have additional guidance on our website. It's if you go to the forms and information page on our website, there is there's a link that is the LCDBG procurement procedures. That is about a 24-page document. This is where we have the procurement policy example if you need to adopt one. You need to make it your own, but it is there as a guide. So just some more fun uniform guidance regulations. So the requirements established by this part apply to federal agencies that make awards to non-federal entities. These requirements are applicable to all costs related to federal awards. So administrative requirements, subparts B through D, set forth in the Uniform Administrative Requirements and Cooperative Agreements. So definitions, a non-federal entity means a state, local government, Indian tribe, institution of higher education, or nonprofit organization that carries out a federal award as a recipient or a subrecipient. The general procurement standards, the non-federal entity must have and use documented procurement procedures consistent with state, local, and tribal laws and regulations and the standards of this section for acquisition of property or services required under a federal award or subaward. All procurement transactions must be conducted in a manner providing full and open competition consistent with the standards of this section to ensure objective contractor performance and eliminate unfair competitive advantage. Competition contractors that develop specifications, requirements, statements of work, invitations for bid, requests for proposals must be excluded from competing for such procurements. The non-federal entity must retain records sufficient to detail the history of the procurement. These records will include, but not necessarily limited to, the following: rationale for the method of procurement, selection of contract type, contractor selection or rejection, and the basis for the contract price. So all pre-qualified lists of persons, firms, or products which are used in acquiring goods and services are current and include enough qualified sources to ensure maximum open, free competition. So that we've run into this here lately, working with some of the larger entities, some of the larger parishes. They have a pre-qualified list. You are able to choose. They've already gone through a solicitation process, and they have a list of engineer firms, let's say, that are ready to go on a project. You can select one from that list, but you have to have a list, and the competition had already needed to have happened. The non-federal entity is encouraged to enter into state and local intergovernmental agreements or inter-entity agreements where appropriate for procurement or use of common or shared goods and services. Competition requirements will be met with documented procurement actions used in strategic sourcing, shared services, and other similar procurement arrangements. Just as a reminder, our office is here to offer technical assistance throughout the procurement process. Please come to us early. We have to approve your solicitation before it is publicized. We are here to help you. The RFP, like I just said, we have to approve all of the RFQs and RFPs before they go to publicize. If you have a water sector project, if you're going to be working on round 2, start working on your proposal or your RFQ for your engineer now. We're happy to help you. Water sector is federally funded, so it also must follow 2 CFR Part 200 requirements. And again, you can find a sample procurement policy on our website under LCDBG procurement policies or procedures. Again, my name is Christy Galley. I'm the program manager for the CDBG program. Denise McGee is one of our grant representatives who assists with procurement. And William Hall is a financial analyst who also assists. And I guess now we are ready to take some questions. Heather, do we have any questions?
I've answered everything that people have put in the Q&A and chat. So right now we don't have any. We'll give people a few minutes or a couple minutes. Christy, we can go back through some of the questions that we answered.
Okay.
The latest question was, if we have an engineer we use regularly for the town and we want to use their firm and pay for them out of town funds for the project, can we do that? And I had answered yes, and she said without procurement. So maybe you could talk about that.
Yeah, so this webinar is if you are using federal dollars. If you are going to use local funds for your engineering firm and your administrative firm, you don't have to come through us.
And someone asked when the water sector application is due. Round two has not been announced.
Yeah, round 2 has not been announced, but I would start working on procurement now. That way, when they do announce when the portal will open, you are ready to go with your engineer.
See, the latest one is non-federal entities, municipalities, parishes, et cetera, are required by law to award publicly bid construction projects to the lowest responsive bidder, regardless of qualifications or experience.
That will need William's help with that, but if they are an engineer, the request for qualifications, it cannot be just based on price. William, are you there?
I think he is not on the phone. So we'll also be posting these on our website. The answers to these. Let's see. Someone asked about when will we receive approval, or when will they receive approval letters for the Love Louisiana Outdoors program?
So we have round one letters we're waiting to get approval from the division. As soon as we get that, I need to send the letters over to the governor's office for signature. And then hopefully in the next week or so.
Okay, just to clarify, construction projects are awarded based on price, and you have to follow state bid law, which is in conformance with federal sealed bids, as to the lowest responsible and responsive bidder. Yes, William said sealed bids does not apply to professional services, and that's correct. Let's see. Someone said we will have multiple projects. Can we hire one engineering firm to handle all?
I mean, that would have to be in the solicitation.
Yes, you can. Yeah. Let's see. I think that's all the ones that have been posted. I think we've answered everything.
Just scroll through just to.
Yeah, make sure. We did get one earlier, so I just wanted to make sure to talk about. Someone asked in which of the evaluation criteria is it useful to include the following? Affirmative efforts must be undertaken to hire women's business enterprises, minority firms, and labor surplus firms, both by the grantee and the project's prime contractor. And it cannot be used as scoring criteria.
Correct.
You should make efforts to reach out to those groups, like to direct solicit the ones that qualify, but you can't use it as scoring criteria.
Right. So when you send out your emails to the firms, if you know that you have several firms that are minority or women owned, then that would qualify as that. So that's where you do that.
I think someone asked, I don't know if we answered this, when does round 2 for Love Louisiana Outdoors start? It has
started. Yeah, it has begun, and the applications are due June 1st, and you can email them to me.
And we have a webinar on at 3:00 about that program too. And that information is on our website, the same place where you logged in for this one. Right below that is the information for the next webinar.
Yeah, that webinar is at 3, right, Heather?
That's correct, 3:00.
And we would love to see y'all there again.
They said what app is due June 1st? That's the Love Louisiana Outdoors. That's our parks program under CDBG CV program.
That is for invited applicants only. So if you have a question on whether or not you were invited, just email me and I can help you with that.
Someone asked, please provide clarification on the requirement to select the lowest bidder regardless of qualifications. That is for construction contract.
Yeah, we don't typically, the engineers typically handle the construction contracts. We are here to mostly talk about the professional services contracts for the engineering firm and the administrative firms.
Okay, Christy, I think that is about it. We cover construction bidding during implementation training if you get funded or when you get funded. So that does get covered. It's just at a later time.
Okay, so someone had a question in the chat about, are there ever any exceptions for sole source vendors? And William responded, the sole source is when there's only one producer of that item exists. And it does require our approval to go ahead and purchase it, because we will be questioned about it as well. But there shouldn't be sole source for engineers and consultants, administrative consultants. That's for usually an item.
Someone asked for your contact information for the people who do procurement. That's in the Q&A. And here, I'll put it in the chat too for everyone. If they have questions, they can contact you. There you go.
Yeah, and this will, if you go to our website, our contact information is on there. Again, Christy Galley, which is me, Denise McGee. She is one of our grant reps. She's actually out monitoring right now, and William Hall. And you can email all of us. You can email one of us, but we talk every day about items for procurement.
What is the minimum number of respondents for an engineering RFQ?
For it to be competitive too. But in a perfect world, there will be more. But I know things have gotten very difficult right now based upon all of the money that is out there right now. So it is hard to find engineers right now. So we are going to work with you to try to do our best to help you with that.
Some engineers are creating partnerships or acquiring administrative consulting firms as part of their bid. Does this exclude the administrative consultant from participating in the RFP process?
Yes. So they can't have any prior knowledge of the project. So they would not be able to bid on it. So if I were an engineering firm or a consultant and someone approached me, I would tell them to stop. And once the solicitation is ready to go, then they would, they can bid on it. But if they know anything about the project, they can know that it's a park program or, just the basic stuff. But that would not be able, they would not be able to provide any information on the actual project itself because they would be precluded from applying.
We don't have any more open questions.
Okay. Well, I guess if we don't have any more questions, thank y'all for joining us today. I appreciate it. If you have any questions, again, please feel free to reach out to us. We are here as a resource. We are here to assist and help you get this right, because what we don't want is for something to be missed in the procurement process and we have to ask you to pay the funds back because it wasn't competitive or whatever the case may be. We don't want to take your fund. We don't want to have to give the funds back. So please, 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 if you have any doubt or any question, please call us and let us know. And we are happy to help you.